So, have you ever come across this idea that a group of global elites are quietly building a kind of digital prison for all of us? Well, today we're going to dive deep into one of the biggest and most complicated conspiracy theories out there right now, the digital control theory. And let's just start with the question that's at the absolute heart of it all. It's pretty provocative, right? Is the world turning into a digital concentration camp? This question really taps into all those anxieties a lot of us have about technology, about surveillance, and where we're all headed. So here's what we're going to cover. First, what exactly is digital control, according to the people who believe in it? Then we'll look at the 5 big pillars they use as evidence, and we'll try to separate the facts from the fiction. After that, we'll talk about the real threats of digital tech, because there are some. And finally, we'll ask, okay, why is this called a conspiracy theory, and what are the real-world consequences of it all? All right, so let's start with the absolute basics. What are people actually talking about when they say digital control? Okay, so at its core, the belief is this. There's a small, powerful group, the global elites, and they're deliberately using things like digital IDs and new digital currencies to put a master plan into action. This plan, which you've probably heard called the Great Reset, is supposedly designed to completely destroy our privacy and freedom. The end goal, a world where every single citizen is tracked, monitored, and controlled. So how do you even begin to argue something that huge? Well, supporters of the theory point to a bunch of real-world things happening right now as proof that this plot is underway. We're going to go through the 5 main pillars they use as evidence, and we'll break them down one by one. All right, first up, the big one. The example you hear all the time to show what this dystopia would look like is China's social credit system. It's often held up as the blueprint for what's supposedly coming for the rest of the world. And this is where you see the gap right away. The theory claims it's this one, single, unified score for every single person, but the reality on the ground is way more messy. It's actually a patchwork of different local pilot programs, and a lot of them are really focused on the financial reliability of companies. Now, that doesn't mean it's fine. The mass surveillance and the potential for human rights abuses are incredibly serious, but it's just not the one, all-seeing system that it's made out to be. Next up, let's talk about a piece of tech that pretty much all of us used during the pandemic. The digital COVID certificate, or the vaccine passport. For believers in the theory, this was a test run, a trial balloon for a permanent, mandatory global health passport system, all controlled by the World Health Organization to track every one of us. But in reality, it was a temporary fix, created by individual countries just to get travel going again during a massive health crisis. And the WHO has been really clear that they don't touch personal data, and that each government was in full control of its own system. Okay, pillar number 3. This is a big one. It's a phrase that has become a massive part of the theory, the Great Reset, an idea that came from the World Economic Forum. So the conspiracy version of the Great Reset is that it's a secret plan to intentionally crash the economy in order to build a surveillance state where, and I'm sure you've heard this phrase, you'll own nothing and be happy. But if you actually look at what the Great Reset was, it was basically a pretty vague, aspirational call to action for world leaders to think about different economic ideas after the pandemic. There were no actual, specific, enforceable programs that came out of it. All right, now for something a little different. This one doesn't come from global economics, but from, of all places, urban planning. It's the concept of the 15-minute city. The theory goes that this is a really sneaky plan to lock people down into climate districts and then use cameras to find them if they dare to leave their zone. The actual idea, though, is an urban design concept. That's it. It's about making life better by having things like grocery stores, parks, and doctors within a short walk or bike ride, so you don't need a car for everything. The whole point is about more convenient access, not less freedom. And finally, we get to what many people see as the final piece of the puzzle, the real endgame. The future of money itself. We're talking about central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. The fear here is that CBDCs will give governments this godlike power to track everything you buy and freeze your money with just the click of a button if you step out of line. In reality, central banks are just exploring this idea because, well, people are using less and less physical cash. And here's the kicker. Our digital payments are already tracked, just not by the government. They're tracked by private companies, Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, and your bank. Okay, so let's shift gears for a second because this is really, really important. Just because the big overarching conspiracy theory doesn't really hold up to scrutiny doesn't mean we should just ignore all this new technology. There are absolutely real, legitimate concerns that we need to be talking about. And these aren't conspiracy theories, these are real-world problems. The potential for biometric surveillance, for hidden tracking, that's very real. Putting all of our personal data into one single digital ID creates a massive target for data breaches. A totally cashless society could easily leave behind elderly people or anyone without a bank account. And the big one is that our laws just aren't keeping up, leaving a lot of us without clear legal protections. So, you might be thinking, if the concerns are real, then what makes the digital control story a conspiracy theory? What's the actual missing piece here? Well, the one thing it lacks is the key ingredient for any conspiracy, any actual evidence of a secret, coordinated global plan. There's no proof linking the World Economic Forum, the WHO, and all the world's governments in on one single plot. The theory takes a very real systemic process, this massive global push for digitalization, driven by big economic incentives, and it misinterprets it as a sinister plot by a handful of evil people, all while ignoring the perfectly reasonable, stated goals of a lot of these projects. And you can really see how these ideas get traction. When influential public figures talk about a pretty standard urban planning concept in such emotional, loaded language, it makes the whole abstract theory feel much more real and credible to a lot of people. And look, this isn't just some harmless debate happening in the corners of the internet. The spread of this theory has led to some serious, real-world consequences. I mean, city officials in Oxford, England received death threats over their 15-minute city plans. There have been huge protests in the UK, Canada, and the Netherlands against these so-called digital concentration camps. The state of Florida actually banned CBDCs based on these kinds of fears. And maybe the most damaging thing of all is this growing, widespread distrust in our basic institutions. So, it all leaves us with one last really important question. If we actually want to protect our freedoms as the world gets more and more digital, what's the best way to do it? Is it to just reject every new technology and see it as part of a giant conspiracy? Or is it to get involved, to demand democratic oversight, to demand clear laws and strong data protection, to make sure these new tools work for us, not against us? That's really the choice we all have to make.